lost records from ancient civilizations all share one warning: top HFY stories. In the quiet corridors of the galaxy's most advanced research facility, a team of scientists pored over the data retrieved from a recently discovered relic. This wasn't just any relic, it was a series of ancient records, scattered across the ruins of dead civilizations long forgotten by time. Their origins were unclear, but the message was undeniable, consistent, and chilling. The data revealed a simple yet terrifying truth: every advanced civilization that had risen before humanity had fallen due to one shared factor: the underestimation of humanity. Every single one of them had believed they were the peak of sentient evolution, their intellect and technology insurmountable. Yet, without fail, when humanity appeared on the scene, they underestimated the human spirit and will to survive. Story 1: The Fall of the Zealcore Empire. The first record belonged to the Zealcore, a species known for their towering intellect and unparalleled technological prowess. They had conquered half of the galaxy, establishing dominion over countless star systems. But despite their strength, they were not prepared for the ferocity of human survival. According to the account, the Zealcore saw humans as nothing more than primitive beings, no match for their advanced weapons and superior minds. They launched a massive invasion of Earth, certain that humanity would crumble beneath their might. But what they didn't anticipate was the sheer determination of the human will. Humanity fought back with an unrelenting tenacity that overwhelmed the Zealcore. What the Zealcore didn't realize was that humans didn't fight for mere survival, they fought for each other, for their homes, for their future. It wasn't the might of their weapons, but the strength of their hearts that proved to be their undoing. The Zealcore, overconfident in their superiority, had failed to see that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, but its ability to adapt, innovate, and rise above every challenge. By the time the Zealcore realized their mistake, it was too late. Humanity had already turned the tide of the war, and the once dominant Zealcore Empire was reduced to ashes. Story 2: The Silent Eclipse of the Trithar Dominion. The Trithar Dominion was a vast empire, stretching across galaxies, its inhabitants capable of manipulating quantum fields and bending spacetime to their will. They believed they had achieved godlike control over the universe and viewed all lesser species as insignificant. When they encountered humanity, they dismissed Earth's inhabitants as an afterthought, unworthy of attention. The Trithar made their first mistake when they attempted to seize Earth with an insidious weapon, a device capable of erasing entire planets from existence. They activated it, expecting the planet to vanish into nothingness, only for Earth to survive. Unscathed, in their arrogance, they overlooked humanity's greatest weapon, its ingenuity. A small group of human scientists, operating with limited resources and under extreme pressure, reverse-engineered the weapon. They discovered the flaw in its design: humanity's ability to think outside the box and defy expectations had allowed them to find the key to disabling the Trithar's most powerful technology. The Trithar, too late, realized the truth: they had created a weapon that could be turned against them, and humanity's capacity for resourcefulness and unexpected brilliance had become their downfall. Story 3: The Galixian Collapse. The Galixians were a peaceful and highly intelligent species who had perfected the art of diplomacy and conflict resolution. Their vast network of alliances stretched across countless civilizations, and they saw themselves as the protectors of the galaxy. But they made one fatal miscalculation when they encountered humanity. The Galixians, in their infinite wisdom, believed that peace was always the answer. They had never known war, never had to fight for survival. So when humanity came to them seeking trade and alliance, the Galixians extended a welcoming hand, believing that humans, like the many species before them, would fall into their utopian way of thinking. But humanity was different. Unlike other species that had conformed to the Galixian ideals of peace, humans had faced countless wars, struggles, and crises throughout their history. They had been shaped by conflict, but had also learned to grow and adapt from it. In the end, humanity refused to be dictated by another civilization's way of life. When the Galixians attempted to impose their perfect system on Earth, they were met with resistance, not in the form of violence, but through the undeniable will to maintain their own identity and sovereignty. The Galixians, who had never before encountered such resolute defiance, were unprepared for humanity's refusal to bow to any power, no matter how great. It wasn't that humans had rejected peace, it was that they had learned from their tumultuous history that peace could not come at the cost of their freedom. The warning. The ancient records, when pieced together, shared a chilling warning: do not underestimate humanity. Every civilization that had fallen before Earth's rise had done so because they believed that humanity was not a threat, that their superiority made them invincible. But in the end, it was their hubris, their failure to recognize humanity's resilience, adaptability, and indomitable spirit, that led to their destruction. The scientists studying the records realized the warning was not just for the past, it was for the future. As humanity expanded into the stars, it was not just the physical challenges they would face but the unseen dangers of complacency and underestimation from those who thought they were superior. The true power of humanity wasn't in its technology, its science, or its armies, it was in the will to persevere, to fight, and to overcome against all odds. That was the lesson every ancient civilization had learned too late. And now, as humanity ventured into the unknown, it stood as a beacon of hope and warning to the rest of the galaxy: never underestimate humanity. The records closed with a final cryptic message, seemingly from the last of the fallen civilizations. We thought ourselves the pinnacle. We were wrong. You will rise where we fell. Story 4: The Dominion of Oryx. The Oryx were a race of sentient beings who had mastered the art of biological enhancement. Their civilization had achieved harmony between mind and body, crafting themselves into perfect forms of strength and intelligence. They had conquered not by force alone, but by the integration of biology and technology, enhancing themselves to such a degree that they were nearly invulnerable to the threats of the universe. When the Oryx first encountered humanity, they did so with an air of superiority, believing their physical and mental enhancements made them unassailable. They saw human beings as frail, unworthy of existence on the galactic stage, and initially left Earth alone. But when the Oryx began to sense the growing influence of humanity's technological expansion, they saw the need to crush this insignificant species before it could rise further. The Oryx's first attempt to subjugate humanity came in the form of a subtle invasion, infecting key human leaders and governments with a nanite-based mind control virus. The Oryx believed that by controlling Earth's political structures, they could effectively govern the planet and suppress humanity's growth. What the Oryx didn't account for was the profound resilience of the human mind. Unlike other species, humans were capable of not only resisting manipulation but also of fighting it, with a unique creativity and determination that no biological enhancement could predict. Using a combination of psychology, medicine, and human ingenuity, Earth's finest minds developed an antidote to the virus and turned the tables on their invaders. The Oryx, caught off guard by humanity's ability to fight back, attempted to deploy a massive biological weapon to wipe out Earth's resistance. However, humanity had once again adapted. Using the Oryx's own biological technologies, the humans developed a countermeasure that neutralized the weapon and sent the Oryx into retreat. The Oryx, devastated by their failure, realized too late that their physical and mental enhancements could not match the unpredictability and adaptability of human nature. They had underestimated a fundamental truth: the mind of a human, when united and driven, could outpace even the most advanced biological technologies. Story 5: The Fall of the Conclave of Ztara. The Conclave of Ztara was an intergalactic coalition of peaceful races who had flourished for millennia. They had come together under one banner, following a doctrine of universal harmony, mutual respect, and understanding. The Ztara believed in the inherent good in every species, having witnessed the beauty of countless civilizations who lived in peace. When humanity arrived on the galactic scene, the Conclave saw an opportunity to assimilate Earth into their utopian order. At first, the Conclave offered humans peace and shared knowledge, believing that Earth's violent history could be left behind in exchange for harmony. The Conclave was pleased by the way humanity seemed to be evolving, their cultures filled with creativity, innovation, and compassion. But the Ztara made one critical error: they misinterpreted humanity's history of conflict as a sign of weakness, rather than a necessary aspect of their survival. Humanity, eager for peace but unwilling to surrender its autonomy, initially accepted the Conclave's offers. But as time went on, tensions arose. The Ztara's attempts to enforce their doctrine of peace began to feel less like guidance and more like control. The more they attempted to impose their way of life, the more humans began to resist. The conclave, believing their superiority made them infallible, failed to see the brewing rebellion in the hearts of their new allies. The tipping point came when the conclave attempted to introduce a universal law that would limit humanity's technological advancements for the sake of galactic stability. This move, meant to curb what the Ztara saw as humanity's destructive potential, was perceived by Earth's leaders as a direct attack on human freedom. Instead of crumbling under the weight of the conclave's diplomatic pressures, humanity rallied together, using their incredible resourcefulness to turn the very technology the Ztara had shared against them. The rebellion began not with weapons, but with humanity's ingenuity in hacking and reprogramming Ztara systems to expose their lies. In a swift and decisive move, Earth launched a counteroffensive, exposing the conclave's manipulation and forcing them into a retreat. The Ztara were left bewildered, their perfect vision of galactic peace shattered by a species they had once considered beneath them. The conclave's downfall wasn't in their strength or their wisdom, it was in their failure to understand that the core of humanity's spirit was not submission to an ideal, but the preservation of their independence and freedom. In the end, humanity's refusal to be controlled and its refusal to be underestimated were the very forces that shattered the conclave's perfect peace. Story 6: The Age of the Sarin. The Sarin were a race of beings that had transcended physical bodies, evolving into pure energy beings, capable of manipulating the very fabric of the universe. They were capable of traveling across dimensions, bending space and time with little more than a thought. In their eyes, they had reached the pinnacle of existence, an existence free of physical limitations, an existence beyond mortality. When they first encountered humanity, they saw Earth's inhabitants as primitive, their minds bound to the constraints of flesh and bone. The Sarin offered humanity a chance to ascend as they had, to join the ranks of energy beings who were above the struggles of physical existence. They told humanity that their bodies were a weakness, holding them back from true enlightenment. But humanity, ever resilient, resisted the Sarin's offer. Some rejected it outright, while others sought to find their own path to advancement without abandoning their humanity. They feared that to lose their physical forms would mean losing something essential: their experiences, their emotions, their ability to connect with one another in the most human way possible. The Sarin, confident in their superiority, attempted to forcibly uplift humanity. But once again, they underestimated the human spirit. Instead of breaking under pressure, the resistance grew. Humans began to unravel the nature of the Sarin's energy-based existence, using their understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation to disrupt the Sarin's very essence. In the final confrontation, it wasn't physical strength that decided the outcome, it was the human ability to retain their identity and their will to hold on to their humanity. The Sarin, unable to comprehend why humanity would reject their offer of transcendence, fell before the tenacity of a species determined to retain what made them who they were. The warning from the Sarin was clear in their final transmission: never underestimate humanity's attachment to their own identity. They are not easily swayed, and in their refusal to be what others think they should be, they have the power to shape their destiny. The universal truth. By now, the research team had compiled an overwhelming amount of evidence. The lost records, scattered across time and space, all shared the same message: humanity was the great variable that no one had ever accounted for. The scientists knew that this knowledge could change the course of human history. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about understanding why humanity was so resilient, so unpredictable, and so capable of overcoming the impossible. The real question wasn't what would happen if humanity faced another galactic empire or power, it was whether any empire would ever understand what it meant to face humanity, and whether they could survive underestimating them. Story 7: The Silent War of the Garrics. The Garrics were a race of cold, calculating conquerors, machines of war created through centuries of technological evolution. Their empire spanned hundreds of star systems, and their creations, both biological and mechanical, were designed solely for one purpose: to dominate and control. The Garrics had wiped out entire species before, assimilating their technologies and resources, leaving no trace of their existence. They thought themselves unstoppable, untouchable. When they first encountered humanity, they dismissed Earth's population as insignificant. The Garrics had superior weapons, advanced AI systems, and battle strategies that had crushed countless civilizations. They considered humanity's primitive technology and divided political structures a laughingstock. However, they still decided to subjugate Earth for the resources it could provide. They initiated their invasion with brutal precision, deploying automated armies to subdue Earth's defenses. What the Garrics didn't anticipate was humanity's ability to adapt and work together. Though Earth's forces were initially scattered, humanity's resolve was unwavering. Instead of responding with typical military force, human resistance groups began using guerrilla tactics, disrupting supply chains and sabotaging the Garrics' automated machines with improvised tools. But the true turning point came when the Garrics attempted to use their most advanced weapon, a planet-killer weapon capable of erasing Earth from existence with a single shot. The weapon was flawless in design and had never failed them before. They had used it against dozens of worlds. In an act of sheer desperation and ingenuity, humanity's finest engineers and scientists, working together under extreme pressure, managed to hijack the planet-killer's targeting system. They turned the weapon against the Garrics' flagship fleet, forcing a retreat. The Garrics were left speechless. Their perfect weapon turned against them. The Garrics ultimately left the Sol system in defeat, their empire damaged. But they carried with them an important lesson: never underestimate a species willing to fight for its survival, even when it seems hopeless. Story 8: The Clutch of the Vexthar. The Vexthar were an ancient, aquatic race who had ruled vast portions of the galaxy, their civilization predating many others. Their advanced hydrotechnology allowed them to manipulate water on a molecular level, and they had mastered the art of terraforming entire planets to suit their aquatic needs. The Vexthar viewed themselves as the stewards of life, believing that only by reshaping planets could they allow true life to flourish. When they discovered Earth, they viewed it as an untouched gem, a world in need of correction. The Vexthar believed Earth's surface, where land dominated, was a mistake, one that needed to be submerged beneath oceans to restore balance and perfection. They decided to terraform the planet, flooding the surface, and claiming it as their own. They underestimated humanity's adaptability and tenacity. Rather than acquiesce to their plans, humans fought back, not with raw power, but with their ingenuity and will to preserve their world. The people of Earth united, creating vast underground cities, advanced desalination systems, and innovative technologies to reclaim land and survive underwater. Humans demonstrated their ability to not only survive but thrive under pressure. The final blow to the Vexthar came when a coalition of nations, using newly developed deep space technology, developed a way to disable the Vexthar's hydrotechnology and reverse the effects of the terraforming. As the Vexthar's world-changing machinery faltered, humanity's resourcefulness turned the tide of the war. The Vexthar retreated, but not before leaving a warning encoded in their last transmission: "We were too focused on perfection. It was not Earth that needed changing, but our perception of what could be." Story 9: The Dominion of the Draxar. The Draxar were a species of towering reptilian humanoids who had evolved through the brutal realities of endless warfare. Their empire spanned several galaxies, and their armies were unmatched, each Draxar soldier a walking weapon of war. For centuries, the Draxar had sought to expand their empire, conquering worlds with fire and blood, enslaving any who stood in their way. When they encountered humanity, they saw no threat. The Draxar viewed humans as weak, soft creatures, barely capable of standing up for themselves. They considered Earth a prize for their empire, one more world to claim as their own. The Draxar gave humanity an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. Humanity's response was not one of immediate war but one of resistance. Instead of blindly fighting the Draxar's superior forces, Earth's leaders studied their tactics, learning from every encounter and constantly innovating. The humans built alliances with neighboring species, forming a coalition of previously weak and scattered races, united by one common goal: survival. The turning point came when the Draxar attempted to use their superior biological enhancements to create a new breed of super soldiers, each more powerful than any human. They believed this would break humanity's spirit, but in a surprising move, the humans leveraged their ability to communicate and form emotional bonds to create a new strategy: unity in diversity. The Draxar could not understand the concept of working together in such harmony, while the humans used it to win their battles. In the end, The Draxer were forced to retreat, leaving Earth untouched but with a deeper understanding of humanity's power to unite and innovate. As they left, the Draxer broadcasted a final message: the human will is something we never understood. We thought we had perfected strength, but it was the strength of their unity that we could not defeat. Story 10: The Last Stand of Thenkai. Thenkai were a species of psionic beings who had ruled over countless galaxies through the power of their minds. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to control entire civilizations, bending lesser species to their will. Thenkai believed themselves to be the rightful rulers of the universe, convinced that only those with the power of the mind should hold dominion over the stars. When they discovered humanity, they sought to enslave Earth's people, using their psychic powers to control the minds of human leaders and influence the course of human history. Thenkai believed that humanity's lack of telepathic ability made them easy prey. But they were wrong. Humans, though they lacked the psionic powers of Thenkai, possessed something far more dangerous: resilience, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will. Rather than being controlled, humanity learned to fight back against Thenkai's telepathic influence. They developed anti-psychic technology, using it to shield their minds and resist Thenkai's attempts at control. In the final battle, humanity launched a counterattack using a combination of military might, scientific ingenuity, and the sheer willpower of their united species. Thenkai, for the first time, found themselves overwhelmed by the resilience of a species they had never fully understood. Thenkai's final message was chilling: we have learned the truth too late. Your kind may not have the power we wield, but you have something far more dangerous: the ability to choose your own fate. The final message. As the team of scientists analyzed the final records, the warning was clear: humanity's greatest strength was not in any one particular trait, technology, or ability. It was the relentless refusal to be underestimated. Each ancient civilization that had fallen before humanity had done so because they failed to see the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their unyielding will to survive, adapt, and overcome. Story 11: The Chronolord's Error. The Chronolords were an ancient race of time-manipulating beings, capable of bending the fabric of time itself to their will. Their empire was an endless loop of perfection, their civilization a timeless utopia where they had conquered time, reshaped history, and evolved beyond any need for war or conflict. They saw themselves as the custodians of the timeline, convinced that they alone could dictate the future of the universe. For them, existence was merely a set of patterns they could control, an elaborate chessboard where they moved the pieces with precision. When they first detected the rise of humanity, they viewed Earth's inhabitants as a mere glitch in the grand scheme of existence, an anomaly in the timeline, one that threatened their carefully constructed order. They decided to remove humanity from history before it could ever threaten their control over time. The Chronolords did not act with brute force. Instead, they employed their ability to manipulate time, erasing key moments in Earth's history where humanity might have advanced too far. They tried to erase the Industrial Revolution, the Age of Exploration, the Space Race, and even the Digital Age. Each time, they rewrote events, erasing humanity's progress as though it had never happened. But to their surprise, humanity always found a way back. New timelines, new opportunities, new breakthroughs arose despite their manipulations. What the Chronolords didn't understand was that humanity wasn't tied to any one moment in time. Humans were not defined by a singular event or era. They were shaped by their ability to evolve in response to any challenge, to rebuild and grow. No matter how often history was rewritten, they were resilient in a way no other species had been, not bound by the constraints of linear time. As the Chronolords tried again and again to eliminate Earth from existence, they found themselves facing an unforeseen paradox. Every time they attempted to alter history, humanity became more unified, more determined to fight back against their control. Each loop of interference, instead of erasing humanity, only brought them closer together, shaping their will into something undeniable. In their final act of desperation, the Chronolords attempted to go further back in time, to erase humanity before it ever came to be. But as they did so, they were met with a force they could not have predicted. The very concept of humanity itself had become ingrained in the fabric of the universe. Erasing humanity was no longer possible, because humanity had become an essential part of the timeline, a force of nature that could not be undone. The Chronolords, defeated by the very time they sought to control, sent a final message across all timelines: we have failed. We never understood the paradox of humanity. They do not belong to time, they make time their own. Story 12, The Betrayal of the Zeltar. The Zeltar were an ancient and powerful race of energy manipulators, whose empire stretched across star systems and spanned eons. Their technology allowed them to draw upon cosmic forces, harnessing the power of stars and galaxies to fuel their civilization. The Zeltar had ruled with an iron fist, their energy-based weapons and shields rendering them invincible to all but the most determined enemies. When they encountered humanity, the Zeltar initially saw an opportunity for alliance. Believing they could mold Earth's inhabitants into loyal subjects, they offered humanity advanced energy manipulation technologies and cosmic knowledge in exchange for allegiance. Earth's leaders, hesitant but hopeful, agreed to form an alliance, eager to advance their own civilization. But the Zeltar had one hidden agenda: they did not intend to share their power with humanity, they intended to use Earth's people as fuel for their own growing empire. They believed humanity would be easily manipulated, as they had done with countless species before. They began extracting energy from Earth, subtly siphoning power from the planet's core, and feeding it into their own energy grids. At first, humanity had no idea, but as time went on, strange anomalies began to occur: earthquakes, violent storms, unexplained disruptions in Earth's magnetic field. It became clear that something was draining the planet's energy. When humanity discovered the truth, they were outraged, realizing that the Zeltar had betrayed them. In response, humanity did not cower, as the Zeltar had expected. Instead, they fought back with an ingenuity and defiance that shook the Zeltar to their core. Humans developed a new form of energy, one that was capable of disrupting the Zeltar's systems. It was a new power, born not from cosmic forces, but from humanity's own understanding of natural resources and physics. The final battle was fought not with the energy weapons the Zeltar had once used to dominate civilizations, but with the resourcefulness of a species that refused to be enslaved. Humanity turned the tables on their former allies, using their own technologies against them and forcing the Zeltar to retreat. In their final moments of defeat, the Zeltar broadcasted a message to the galaxy: we underestimated them. We thought we could control them, but their spirit is too strong. Their potential for creation and destruction is beyond anything we ever imagined. Story 13, The Fall of the Shadrith. The Shadrith were a race of shadowy, elusive beings who thrived on secrecy and subterfuge. Their empire spanned entire sectors of the galaxy, built on espionage, manipulation, and the art of the unseen. They were masters of illusion, capable of blending into the darkness of space itself, making them almost impossible to track or defeat. The Shadrith operated in the shadows, manipulating events from behind the scenes, pulling the strings of entire civilizations without them even realizing it. When the Shadrith first encountered humanity, they saw an opportunity to manipulate Earth's young governments, sowing discord and division among human nations. The Shadrith believed that humans, so new to the galactic stage, would be easy to deceive and control. They began to infiltrate Earth's political systems, subtly influencing key figures, playing factions against one another, and ensuring that humanity's rise was slowed by internal conflict. But the Shadrith underestimated a fundamental truth about humanity: the more they tried to divide, the more the human spirit came together. Humans, when faced with adversity, were not easily broken. They found unity in the darkest times. The more the Shadrith interfered, the more humanity learned to resist, to uncover their manipulations, and to expose their true intentions. It wasn't just humanity's military might that drove the Shadrith back, it was their ability to see through deception. Earth's intelligence agencies, working in tandem with civilian resistance groups, began to unravel the Shadrith's web of lies. Using a combination of human ingenuity and technological advancements, they uncovered the Shadrith's hidden bases and revealed their manipulation to the entire world. In the final confrontation, humanity's resolve was unshakable. The Shadrith, for the first time, found themselves outmatched by the very people they had tried to control. The human will to uncover the truth and stand united proved stronger than the Shadrith's mastery of secrecy. As the Shadrith fled into the darkness, they left behind a final message: we did not understand. It was never about secrecy, nor division. Humanity's true strength lies in its unwavering search for truth. Story 14: The Legacy of Humanity. As the final records were decrypted and pieced together, the scientists studying the ancient ruins had no doubts about the ultimate message left by these lost civilizations. Story 15: The Descent of the Nuaraxi. The Nuaraxi were an ancient race of beings who had perfected the art of genetic manipulation. Their empire spanned multiple galaxies, and their people were biologically engineered for perfection, strong, intelligent, and nearly immortal. The Nuaraxi had created a society based on the concept of genetic superiority, with the belief that only the genetically perfect should thrive. They viewed the vast majority of species in the universe as inferior, with Earth's inhabitants being no exception. When they discovered humanity, they immediately saw it as a species ripe for genetic improvement. They began to subtly intervene in Earth's development, attempting to modify the human genome through covert methods. Their aim was to enhance human beings in their own image, manipulating Earth's population to create a new race of superhumans. What the Nuaraxi didn't expect was humanity's fierce attachment to its individuality and the very essence of what it meant to be human. Despite the allure of genetic enhancement, humans refused to be molded into a form dictated by an outside force. Instead of accepting the Nuaraxi's vision of genetic perfection, humanity began to study their own biology and develop countermeasures, rejecting the idea that any one being, or any one race, could define their future. The Nuaraxi, infuriated by this resistance, escalated their efforts. They released a series of genetically engineered plagues that threatened to wipe out human populations, attempting to force humanity into submission. But they underestimated human resilience. Rather than folding, humans turned their ingenuity against the Nuaraxi's engineered disease. They developed cures and treatments at an unprecedented speed, using their natural ability to adapt to environmental pressures. The very thing the Nuaraxi sought to eradicate, human innovation and adaptability, became the weapon that saved them. In a final, desperate attempt to take control, the Nuaraxi launched a full-scale invasion, using their genetically superior soldiers to crush Earth's defenses. But what the Nuaraxi didn't anticipate was humanity's refusal to be defined by genetic perfection. They were not merely a species of survivors. They were a species of creators, thinkers, and dreamers. Humanity fought back not with genetic superiority, but with sheer determination, cunning, and a spirit that refused to yield. The Nuaraxi were ultimately defeated, their empire shattered by the strength of a species they had so arrogantly underestimated. As they retreated, the Nuaraxi's final transmission echoed across the stars. "We sought to perfect them, but we failed to understand the true nature of humanity. They do not need perfection, they need only their will to survive." Story 16: The Hegemony of the Vrox. The Vrox were a species of hyperintelligent, hive-minded beings who lived in perfect harmony, their thoughts and actions synchronized by a collective consciousness. Their civilization was the pinnacle of efficiency and order, with every individual playing a role in the greater whole. To the Vrox, individuality was a flaw, and their unity was their greatest strength. Their empire spread across the galaxy, and they sought to bring all lesser species into their collective, seeing it as a way to uplift all life to a higher state of being. When the Vrox discovered humanity, they saw it as an imperfect species, too chaotic, too independent, and too unpredictable. To them, humanity was a primitive race that needed to be assimilated into their collective consciousness to survive and evolve. The Vrox began to infiltrate human society, using their advanced technology and telepathic abilities to implant ideas into human minds, attempting to make humans think and act as one. But humanity's strength lay not in uniformity, but in diversity. Each human mind was a unique, unpredictable force, one that thrived on free will, choice, and individual expression. When the Vrox attempted to bring Earth into their collective, they were met with fierce resistance. Humans refused to lose their individuality, and the more the Vrox tried to erase that individuality, the more humanity's resolve grew. What the Vrox failed to comprehend was that individuality itself was humanity's greatest strength. Each person, no matter how small, had the power to think differently, to innovate, and to see the world in a new way. It was this diversity of thought that allowed humans to adapt and thrive in ways that a hive-minded species could not. As the Vrox launched their invasion, humanity fought back using their own ingenuity. They created technologies that disrupted the Vrox's collective consciousness, severing the hive mind and allowing individual humans to strike back with overwhelming force. The Vrox's perfect order was shattered by humanity's refusal to conform. In the aftermath, the Vrox retreated, defeated by the very thing they had sought to suppress. Before their departure, they sent one last message. We failed to understand the power of individuality. Humanity's strength lies not in unity, but in their ability to think and act as individuals. This is something we could never control. Story 17, The Aegis War. The Aegis were a race of peaceful, pacifistic beings who had evolved to live in perfect harmony with the cosmos. They were a species who had dedicated themselves to preserving life in all its forms, believing that the universe's natural order was to be protected above all else. Their civilization had flourished for millennia without war, and they had mastered the art of diplomacy and mediation. The Aegis were regarded as the galaxy's guardians, always willing to step in to mediate conflicts and maintain balance. When they first encountered humanity, the Aegis were hopeful. They saw potential in Earth's diverse and rapidly advancing species, and they believed that with a little guidance, humans could join the ranks of the enlightened races of the galaxy. The Aegis extended their hand in peace, offering wisdom and technology in exchange for cooperation. However, the Aegis were ill-prepared for the storm that was humanity. Humans, though they valued peace, were not interested in being molded into someone else's image. They had their own way of doing things, their own path to follow, and while they appreciated the Aegis' offer of peace, they refused to abandon their independence. The Aegis, unable to comprehend the idea of a species turning down their wisdom, grew frustrated. They began to subtly intervene in Earth's politics, attempting to shape humanity's future according to their ideals. But what the Aegis failed to realize was that humanity's strength was in its ability to make its own choices. Even when those choices led to conflict, they valued freedom over any imposed peace. When the Aegis attempted to impose their values on Earth, they were met with resistance. Human leaders rejected their offers, and the people of Earth began to rally together, realizing that their freedom was being threatened by the very beings who had once offered them peace. In the ensuing conflict, the Aegis were shocked to discover that the very species they had hoped to elevate was unwilling to be controlled, even for the greater good. Humanity fought with determination and unity, not because they sought war, but because they believed in their right to shape their own future. They refused to allow any species to define what was best for them. The Aegis, realizing their mistake, withdrew from Earth, sending one last message. We have learned a valuable lesson. Peace cannot be imposed, and the strength of humanity lies not in submission, but in their ability to choose their own path, even when it leads to conflict. Story 18, The Return of the Pharon. The Pharon were an ancient race of psychic beings who had mastered the manipulation of thought and emotion. Story 20, The Final Stand of the Volxarii. The Volxarii were an ancient species of cybernetic warriors, famed across the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency and cold, logical approach to life. They believed that the universe was a battlefield, and only the strongest had the right to rule. With their heavily augmented bodies, advanced technology, and brutal militaristic culture, they had conquered countless worlds and enslaved entire species. Their empire was one of terror, built on fear and domination. When they discovered humanity, the Volxarii initially saw a species ripe for conquest. The human race was primitive, they thought, incapable of resisting their advanced technology and combat prowess. They planned to invade Earth and use it as a resource-rich colony to further their war machine. However, the Volxarii did not anticipate the strength of human determination and ingenuity. When their invasion forces landed, they were met not with the resistance of a technologically superior enemy, but with a relentless, unpredictable force that fought with everything they had. At first, the Volxarii underestimated the human ability to organize, adapt, and fight back. Earth's militaries were small, fragmented, and technologically inferior compared to the Volxarii's cybernetic legions. But humans had something the Volxarii did not: creativity. Humanity quickly adapted their technology, repurposing old weapons, building new ones, and creating guerrilla tactics that disrupted the Volxarii's technological superiority. Humans were not bound by the same rigid logic that drove the Volxarii. They fought with passion, unpredictability, and a belief in their right to exist. In the most decisive battle, humanity's ingenuity triumphed. They hacked into the Volkseri's cybernetic systems, exploiting their over-reliance on technology. The Volkseri's machines turned against them, and their once unstoppable war machines were rendered useless. Human forces, united in purpose, overwhelmed the Volkseri's remaining forces with sheer force of will and creativity. As the last Volkseri fleet retreated, they sent a final, chilling message to the galaxy: we miscalculated. Humanity is not bound by logic or technology. It is driven by something far more dangerous, an indomitable spirit that cannot be controlled or defeated. Story 21, The Tainted Gift of the Zalar. The Zalar were a race of seemingly benevolent beings who offered peace and advancement to countless worlds across the galaxy. Their empire was built on the belief that they were the guardians of knowledge and progress, and they saw themselves as saviors of less advanced species. They were capable of incredible feats of bioengineering, able to cure diseases, extend life, and enhance mental capabilities. When they discovered humanity, the Zalar offered their assistance. They presented themselves as wise mentors, offering advanced knowledge and technology to help humanity advance beyond their current state. They promised to uplift Earth's people to their level of enlightenment. However, the Zalar's true motives were far more insidious than they appeared. While they did provide advancements, they also subtly altered humanity's biology. Their gifts were not entirely benevolent, human minds were enhanced. Yes, but also subtly programmed to be more docile, more compliant. The Zalar intended to make humanity their obedient servants, a subjugated species living under the guise of enlightenment. But the Zalar underestimated something fundamental about humanity. The very same mind they sought to control was capable of breaking free. The genetic modifications they had made created a resistance within human minds, a pushback against the subtle influences the Zalar had implemented. It wasn't long before humanity began to understand the true cost of the gift the Zalar had given them. Instead of bending to the Zalar's will, humans used the enhancements to their advantage. They found ways to break free of the mental constraints the Zalar had placed on them and began to push back. It was not through force or violence initially, but through the human spirit of rebellion and independence that they began to reclaim their minds and their autonomy. The Zalar, realizing that their plan had failed, attempted to withdraw from Earth and erase the genetic alterations they had made. But by then, humanity had already learned to control and reverse the modifications. The human mind was no longer something that could be tampered with. They had grown stronger, more aware, and more independent than the Zalar had ever expected. As the Zalar retreated, they sent one final warning to Earth. We offered you advancement, but you refused to see the cost. Your minds are your greatest strength, and your greatest danger. We failed because we underestimated your resilience. You will never again be so easily controlled. Story 22, The Hidden War. The Karzal were an ancient race of shadowy figures that lived in the deepest reaches of space, their existence cloaked in mystery. Their empire was built on subterfuge, secrecy, and espionage. They were masters of infiltration, capable of manipulating the events of entire galaxies from the shadows without ever being detected. They were feared by all, for no one had ever truly seen them, nor had anyone ever successfully fought against them. When the Karzal first learned of humanity, they saw a promising target. Humanity's rapid expansion into the galaxy was seen as a threat to their quiet domination. They decided that Earth's growth must be stopped before it could challenge their hidden empire. The Karzal infiltrated Earth's governments, subtly guiding human leaders into making choices that would destabilize their own world. They fed humanity misinformation, manipulating public opinion and sowing discord. At first, it seemed as though their plan was succeeding. Humanity began to tear itself apart under the weight of misinformation and internal conflict. The Karzal believed that humanity would crumble under their influence, just as countless other species had done before. But humanity's strength was never in the ease of their victories, it was in their ability to persevere. They refused to let external manipulation break their spirit. Earth's people began to wake up to the truth of the Karzal's manipulation. They realized that they were being controlled by unseen forces and began to fight back against the shadowy empire that had sought to divide them. Humanity's first step toward victory was the unity they found in their shared struggle. They banded together, regardless of nationality or creed, to expose the truth. Working in secret, They began to uncover the Karzal's covert operations and sabotage their influence on Earth. The fight was long and difficult, but humanity's resilience and ability to unite in the face of unseen threats made them an unstoppable force. In the final showdown, humanity turned the tables on the Karzal, using their own tactics of secrecy and subterfuge against them. As the Karzal were exposed and defeated, they sent a final transmission to the galaxy. We believed you would fall into chaos, that you would destroy yourselves. But humanity's ability to unite and fight against the unseen is something we could never have predicted. We failed because we did not understand the true power of human will. Story 23: The Dying Empire of the Elxerai. The Elxerai were an ancient and once great empire that had ruled over vast sections of the galaxy. Their civilization was built on power, opulence, and control over the eons. However, the Elxerai had grown decadent and complacent. Their technology stagnated, their empire crumbled, and their people became obsessed with luxury rather than progress.